The following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Thank you for coming to the Project Entertainment Network store. Please place your order. A good choice. A t-shirt for the horror show with Brian Keene. Amanda Method coffee mug. There's more. A Necrocast on hoodie. That's sharp. But why on earth would you want Bizong leggings? Wait. Are you Mr. Frank? The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with goodies from all your favorite podcasts. T-shirts, hoodies, mugs and more. www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
There shall come a podcast. A podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back once again, true believers, to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I am Christopher Golden, and folks, I say Excelsior. Brian, I get a little sadder as we approach the end of the Defenders run, particularly because I'm finding with every issue that this run, this Gillis run of Defenders, it's much better than I remember it. I mean, I remember liking it, but I'm getting so much more out of it than I remember having gotten out of it the first time.
I wholeheartedly agree. You and I read these as teenagers.
Right.
Today we're covering 140, issues 140 and 141. I believe those were 1985. So we would have been, seniors in high school?
Yep.
We enjoyed them at the time, but I got to tell you, as an adult, going back and rereading this, there's a lot of meat and a lot of subtext here that, 1985 Brian it went completely over my head. Something else I've noticed, particularly with issue 141, but it's something you've brought up on the show before regarding Gillis. A lot of the stuff he does here, it's very reminiscent of Alan Moore's seminal run on the Swamp Thing, except that Gillis was doing all of this like a year or two before Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing began, I believe. So yeah. It's weird, the zeitgeist, Yeah,
and doing superheroes and doing it's such an odd book. But as we'll discover as we get probably in the next episode, I'm not sure how early Gillis knew that the series would be coming to an end. In those days in Marvel, I'm sure that he certainly didn't know while writing issue 140 that 152 would be the last issue.
Right.
But it starts to get more, it's so set apart being in New Mexico from the rest of the Marvel Universe. But it begins to feel the repercussions of the rest of the Marvel Universe starting probably in the next couple of issues.
Absolutely.
And that only increases as we go toward the end. And in fact, I believe the reason that this series ends at 152 is because of things, it's not because of the series, it's because of things happening elsewhere in the Marvel Universe. But we'll get to that obviously as we get closer. But it is fascinating that these, I don't know, it's anyway. Issue, we'll discuss as we go. Issue 140 and 141 are written by Peter B. Gillis, pencils by Don Perlin, inks by Kim DeMolder.
That's right. And we open with a gorgeous splash page. It's a bouquet of lovely flowers and a poem written by Hank McCoy, a.k.a. The Beast. Do you want me to read the poem?
No, please don't.
No? Okay.
Well, only if you read it in your Hellcat voice.
Oh, no. I wouldn't do that. Because this poem is a poem about love, and I would never make fun of love. But we find out that it is, in fact, Vera, Hank's long-suffering girlfriend who we have not seen in the pages of the Defenders since Gillis took over. And, he basically sent her a poem and flowers to let her know that he still loves her. And, that's all fine and dandy, except that, he moved to New Mexico without even telling her.
The crazy thing about this is that in every other aspect, Hank McCoy seems to be the most thoughtful member of the group.
Right.
And yet, this is something straight out. I watch a lot of movies from the 1940s, and this seems like something straight out of a 1930s or 1940s Hollywood film where the girlfriend is home, furious at her boyfriend for doing something without telling her. And then, she says, then you think you can send me flowers and write me a poem. And then the final panel of the page is her looking wistful, saying, that's too lovely to bear. And she's like looking at the flowers. So despite the fact that her boyfriend moved across the country without telling her, she forgives him somehow because he wrote her a poem and sent flowers. If you are a person who is young, who's listening to this podcast, let Brian and let Uncle Brian and Uncle Chris tell you that is not ever going to happen to you. You are never going to act like that much of an asshole and be forgiven because you sent a poem and flowers. It's just not going to happen.
I mean, I've tried the poem and flowers route, and yeah, my results were not as spectacular as Hank's.
I just read that page and I couldn't help it. It really is straight out of like 1940s Hollywood.
Yeah,
but in any case,
glorious.
And then ironically, this issue is titled "The Heartbreak Kid."
It is
a famous film of the 1970s, I believe, starring Charles Grodin.
Yep. We then transition to New Mexico and Warren Worthington, a.k.a. the Angels' Airy, which is now the headquarters of the Defenders, where the Defenders are engaged in a battle with brunch.
Yeah, they're having a lovely brunch. In fact, I looked at this page and I thought, damn, like this is what our trip to the Trapp Family Lodge for the Trapp Family Lodge Winter Writers Retreat this year was like. Except we did not have Moondragon come in her brand new costume, Brian.
Well, I like this as a longtime Defenders fan. This is the first time since the new Defenders became, this team that we've seen. We saw this all the time with Steve Gerber, with J.M. DeMatteis. These small scenes of the Defenders just being a family. And we've yet to see that with the new Defenders. And I mean, we see them lounging by the pool, but Bobby's hitting on Cloud, and Beast and Warren are doing stupid shit. Here they're just they're sitting having brunch, and Moondragon comes out in her brand new costume.
Excuse me, and everyone is impressed by her new costume, and she seems, even in the art, to be more relaxed, Brian.
Yes, absolutely. Her dialogue is different. She's kinder. She's more warm and open. Her body language, exactly the way Perlin draws her, she's much more relaxed.
Even now, she's being kinder to Isaac. You can see that. Very interesting, and interesting also because, again, like you talked about how you hated Moondragon as a character. I'm curious, as you're reading these issues, if you're becoming more interested in her as a character as you're rereading these.
I'm absolutely because she's a little more human now. There's a part of me, because I don't remember much about this run after this point. There's part of me that's wondering if this newfound humility is just a trick, but I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt as we go on.
Well, she talks about the fact that now she finally realizes what Odin sought to teach her with that headband. That she has learned to be humble, or at least seemingly. And she's apologizing for any harm she may have caused. And she says, may I have a plate? So she's just joining in with the normal human moments here. And then, of course, I love this whispered aside from Hank to Bobby, where he says, "You'll notice she still puts us in the humblest category." So she still is aloof, but she's at least one of them now.
Yep.
Then we get Cloud coming in while Moondragon is meditating, wanting to have a conversation, and Cloud transforms from presenting as female to presenting as male in this scene, and talks about how the fact that they are just a kid doesn't make their feelings any weaker.
Right.
But Moondragon does what is right to do with a person of Cloud's age, essentially saying, that you're young, and listen, I was sending out Moondragon saying she was sending out subliminal messages to everybody in order to try to influence them all to get her headband off, and Cloud was just caught up in that, and it's her fault, Moondragon's fault, and then Cloud says, "Does this mean you don't love me at all?" Moondragon says, "If you can tell me what love is, then I can answer you. Otherwise." So basically, Moondragon has broken Cloud's heart, at least for the moment.
Right. We then, Chris, get an ad for DP barbells.
Wait, say that again?
DP barbells. You're reading the
I am
floppies,
reading the floppy
right?
comic, just like you.
And I'm reading the floppies too. Now, did you order stuff from comic books when you were a kid?
I definitely didn't order barbells.
I ordered these barbells from this page, from this issue of the Defenders, or it was another Marvel comic that month. But I cut out the order form and I mailed it in. And I was a senior in high school and I was going to get fit. Damn it! I was tired of being the kid selling pot under the bleachers. I wanted to have a Charles Atlas body, and I remember the disappointment when these things arrived because they were plastic, and the idea was you were supposed to fill them up with sand. Except I didn't have access to sand, so I tried using water, and it was a disaster.
It was a mess.
It was
a mess. We did have some weights filled with sand in my home, and generally what tends to happen with those cheap ones is that eventually you drop it wrong and it cracks and the sand goes everywhere.
Right.
Anyway, but we digress.
We then transition to a small Midwestern town. It doesn't tell us where. And there's a young man in a jail cell. And the sheriff, or at least we think it's the sheriff, is bringing him food, brings it into the cell. And, he says, "I know you're hungry. It's from the diner. Eat it." And the kid says, "Just leave it. That'll be fine." And the sheriff gets mad. He says, "No, it's not fine. Why did you do it? Why did you do it?" And the kid says, "You wouldn't understand." And the sheriff smacks him across the face and says, "You're right. I wouldn't." And we then find out that this boy is the sheriff's son. Yeah. And we don't know what he did, but he explains to his father that whatever it was, he did it because he hates his father.
Well, which is a classic, a classic theme, I think, in so much fiction about teens. In any case, then we cut to the sheriff's home. His wife, this kid's mother, is washing dishes, and the doorbell rings. And then a woman shows up, and she is named Edna Mae Terry. Let me see. I'm trying to remember here now. I just read this a couple days ago. She's his teacher, right?
Right. Yep. She's either the teacher or the principal. I believe the teacher.
Right. So she comes. She wants to see him. We still don't know what he's done. Right.
Right.
But she says, if I could talk to him to see if I can make sense out of what he did, and then she's crying. And then the father says, "I'm going to take you to see him right now." Anyway.
And we should mention, because it it is an important factor in the storyline. Edna May is a woman of color, and the sheriff and his wife and their son, who's done whatever horrible thing he's done here, are white. Bringing that up because, as I said, it does impact the story as we go along here.
Yeah. So basically, to cut to the chase, we have a sequence where we see that the people are protesting outside the jail. The sheriff brings Edna May into the jail to see his son, and Edna May just wants to ask him a question. And she says, "I understand life's confusing for a young man, but why? Why did you do it to me? Why?" And he says, "I'll tell you why I did it, Miss Terry. It's because you were there and available, and because you're a Negro." And his name is Danny. And she says, "What are you saying?" And so basically, something starts to happen with his eyes, Brian.
Yes.
And whatever it is, it's something that is so significant that Moondragon senses it thousands of miles away.
That's right. She says, "I sense something. I've never felt anything like it. Pulled me out of my meditation like a magnet." And she sets off the holographic Defenders alert signal and gathers the Defenders together.
And then, again, we have, despite the fact that Moondragon is struggling with being more humble, we have this exchange, which I love. Beast says, "A source of power, a giant Wankel rotary engine menacing Dubuque, Iowa? What are you talking about?" And she says, "I doubt I could explain it in terms you would understand, Beast." But in any case, there's an argument about whether they should go with her on this whim. That I frankly, despite the fact that I'm really enjoying this run, I found this to be very contrived, this moment. But that's okay. They need to split up the team. So Angel and Valkyrie and Iceman go with Angel, Valkyrie, and Cloud go with Moondragon.
Right.
And Beast, Iceman, and Gargoyle stay behind in New Mexico.
Right.
Yeah. So it's splitting up the team for good reason.
Yep.
Then we have another little tangent, Brian. And this one is very significant because it sets up the next issue. And in fact, here you started talking about Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, and we're setting up what I think is the most horrifying issue of the Defenders, which is the one that follows this one.
Yep.
So we're back to the New Mexico Valley, and a cow is giving birth, and a bunch of the farmers are gathered around, and something is wrong with this.
Yeah, it gives birth to an old man, slippery with greenish slime and covered with separating sores.
There you go. And it looks just as delicious as it sounds, folks.
Yeah.
Thanks to Don Perlin and Kim DeMulder. And then it comes alive, and once again, hearkening back to John Carpenter's The Thing, from my perspective, it reaches out. And what this is, friends, is you'll recall that in the issue, what's the name of this guy again, Brian?
I cannot remember his name. I don't have the issue in front of me.
Well,
but,
we suffice to say that we had the issue where Ephraim Souls.
Ephraim Souls, that's it.
Ephraim Souls, I can't believe I just pulled that out of my 51-year-old brain.
Issue 132.
There you go. So Ephraim Souls turned into that weird plant monster that Bobby Drake finally defeated. And at the end, though, spores floated off across the land.
Right.
And this cow birthing Ephraim Souls all over again is the result of that. And the creature lives again. And we'll find out a lot more about that creature in the next issue. We go back to Abbotsford, which is the name of the town, where now we find a really interesting bit. And again, I can't get over how this is 1985, and so much of what happens in Gillis's run could be happening right now in the pages of another Marvel comic.
Yep, I mean it's Charlottesville. You have a bunch of white supremacists on the back of a pickup truck. apparently it's an open carry state because they're all armed.
Right.
And they have a protest sign that says Danny Shepard, scapegoat of the blacks. And they're going on about, that blacks have been corrupting the white youth of America with immorality, teaching communism, et cetera, et cetera. You also have a.
But again, let's not brush past that though. They're accusing black people of immorality and communism.
Right.
So, and what are we hearing right now? Socialism, right?
Yep. And then you have the crowd of counter protesters, just like we do now, yelling things like "Go on back to Nazi Germany." It's straight out of the headlines, and then just like now, it turns violent.
Right.
A counter protester, a man of color, throws a rock at the white supremacist. He says, "Your place is in a sewer somewhere, scum." Hits the white supremacist giving the speech. At which point the white supremacists they take the safeties off of their weapons, and they say they have a constitutional right to defend themselves, and they're getting ready to shoot, and it's about to get ugly. And then what happens, Chris?
Well, and again, it's very sobering, Brian, for me to read this because this moment, could happen today. I don't just mean today as in the modern era. This could have happened in Charlottesville. Heather Heyer died, because a white supremacist drove a car into protesters. But, so people could open fire at any time in mass. And so it is very sobering because although here we do have the defenders coming to the rescue, in real life, we don't have superpowered individuals who are going to swoop in just in time. But so not to get us off the track.
You know what? Occasionally we should get off the track. Now, because you're right. Not only could this happen at any time, I'll go one step further. It breaks my heart to say it, and I'm terrified to say it, but I suspect we're going to see something like this happen, possibly this summer. All it will take is one incident, and that's why, yes, I'm a gun owner, but I loathe these open carry protests where these morons, go to Walmart with an AR-15 strapped on their back to support their Second Amendment rights. First of all, why are you taking a gun shopping at Walmart? It's stupid. And it's another reason why we really need to drastically revamp our gun laws in this country. And I say that as a gun owner.
Right.
This is something that's going to happen. And that terrifies me as a parent and as an American, Yeah,
I mean, that's what I'm saying is it's bad enough and it is horrifying and nightmarish that we are in a situation in this country where routinely we experience mass murder, gun violence, usually conducted by one or two individuals, and then those individuals almost universally white supremacist terrorists, right?
Right.
So routinely we experience that, and then we have so much unrepentant trolling that happens as a result of that. So that's one thing. But I agree with you. I think it is a fine line between that and the moment during which some kind of protest for gun rights or white supremacists or whatever it might be explodes into mass violence.
Yep, I agree. I think it's a matter of time.
Yep. So I hope we're wrong, but we shall see. But
in the Marvel universe, thank God,
the Defenders.
Cthulhu, there's the Defenders. Angel shows up. Valkyrie stops a bullet from hitting somebody. Angel makes short work of the Nazis, and Moondragon uses her powers to calm down everyone on both sides of the protest.
Yeah, and what's interesting here, this is another interesting thing for me. Moondragon has so much telepathic power and psychic power, and we've seen as readers over the years of X-Men, we've seen so often and even with magic, with Doctor Strange, those characters who have the ability to control the minds of others, it's usually a struggle, right?
Right.
About when is it okay to manipulate others' minds or thoughts. Moondragon doesn't have any hesitation here. There's no like, should I do this? And in this case, we're in favor of what she's done because she's doing it, to save lives.
Right.
But it is a slippery slope, I think.
I absolutely agree. But it fits with her character,
Yep.
So we then transition to a courthouse where Danny is on trial. We still don't know exactly what he's done to Edna May. We suspect perhaps it was sexual assault or rape.
Well, we know by the end of this page.
Yeah, we do. That's why I was setting it up.
Oh, okay. All right.
But yeah, and the defenders are also in the courtroom. Moondragon suspects something, but she's not telling her fellow defenders what it is.
No, well, she's not telling them what it is, but then Edna May testifies, and although she doesn't use the word specifically, it becomes clear that Danny Shepard raped her.
Right.
And so then he basically says, the lawyer's asking if he denies it, and he says, why should I? And then, Brian, I'm not going to repeat the racist things that Danny Shepard says on the stands, but suffice to say the result of that is that a man of color who's in the courtroom stands up with a gun and fires at him.
Right.
Moondragon actually stops the bullet before it strikes him, which I must say saddens me.
Right. Yeah.
I confess. And I know. Here I am talking about gun violence, but this is a complicated issue, right?
It is. But yeah, she does. She pulls a scene right out of the Matrix. She stops the bullet. It's floating there in front of him. And, she tells him, fortunately, you had a telekinetic of some aptitude in your audience to stop this bullet this time. I know what you were trying to accomplish, but perhaps you will tell your friends in this room why, in truth, you've done what you've done. And he says he wanted to break their hearts. And then Moondragon turns to Edna May and uses her telekinetic abilities and says, I want you to tell the whole truth. And what is revealed, Chris?
What's revealed is that although it appears that Danny did not physically rape her, he did so mentally. And purposefully, that he also has some kind of psychic abilities, and that she was so traumatized by what she experienced that she formed the story in her subconscious about what happened. And then Moondragon asks him again, physical or mental assault, why did you do this to one who loved and trusted you? And he says it was the first time he knew that what had been burning inside him for so long, basically, I felt it deep down in you, he says to Edna May, in all of you, where sometimes you even hide it from yourselves, but I saw where the heartbreaks were, and I knew I had to take them. It's a really weird twist,
right.
I feel. It's a really weird... he says he had to break all of their hearts, all of the people who loved him, so that he had to make them think he'd betrayed everything that they believed in. So he could take their heartbreak away and put it out. It's just really fucking weird. It's
very Gerber-esque.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And then he leaves and moves. And it's weird because I confession time. I actually really don't like this ending, which is why I have trouble sort of putting it into words. I think if this comic were written now, due to the subject matter, there's no way that the writer would switch from having had the character be raped to have it all have been. But yet, yes, it is still a mental trauma,
Right.
But there's no way that would be done, I think, right now. But anyway, they want to know why Moondragon isn't stopping this guy from leaving, but she says she doesn't think that she'd be able to do that. Danny's power is not strictly of the mind, but in the spirit, in a way I don't comprehend.
Right.
So it's just really weird because all of a sudden he's done a good thing, even though he's caused all this pain.
Yep. I wonder if Gillis was setting it up to bring him back at some point. Of course, the series ended before he ever got a chance to do that. But that's my take on it. It's like, okay, he set up this huge telekinetic big bad who may not be a big bad. There's sort of shades of Adam Warlock and the Aquarian in this character. I when we have him on, we need to ask him, was there something more he was going to do with this character later on?
Yeah, agreed. Then we cut back to 3 panels of the spore and the creature just growing and growing, all headed for the Defenders' Eyrie in New Mexico.
Which leads right into Defenders 141 with a fantastic cover by your frequent collaborator, Mignola.
Absolutely. This is a great cover.
Yep.
Yeah, this is I think the best of the work that Mike did on these covers for sure.
Yep.
Featuring Valkyrie, the Beast, and the Gargoyle. And rightly so that Mike's cover is on this issue, because this is the one, it's the issue is called All Flesh is Grass. Same team. And this is without a doubt, for me, the most horrifying issue of the Defenders.
Right. We open at the base of the foothills of the Avengers headquarters, and we meet. We in previous issues we've seen this supporting cast. Of course, Candy is now the leader of the Defenders, but there's doctors and scientists and mechanics, etc., all working for them. And we finally meet one of those. His name is Chris Larmouth, and he is the Angel's pilot. He takes care of the private planes. And he's a bit of a health nut. We talked about the weights in the last issue. Well, he's reading weightlifting magazines, and you see his blender there.
So he's young Brian.
Yeah, he's young Brian.
He's ordered the DP barbells.
Yeah, and, he's working for these superheroes. He wants super muscles of his own. And you see him, drinking raw eggs and all this stuff. And then he has his own alfalfa sprouts that he's been cultivating there in the hangar at Defenders headquarters, and he puts them on a sandwich and he eats them, and something horrible happens.
Yes, the spore grows out of him. So it's the same creature. It's all, again, hearkening back to John Carpenter's The Thing. Let's just say from the outset, so people understand what's going on here, that each cell is part of a larger organism. But it has its own, it operates on its own. Each cell is its own individual organism, but it all is part of the larger thing.
Right.
I'm saying that poorly, but you all get the point.
Right.
So even though this is growing out of him here, it's also connected to the other large thing that's continuing to grow.
That's right. The Defenders are, of course, oblivious to this. Beast and Bobby Iceman are arguing. Hank wants to watch an opera, and Iceman wants to watch a Stevie Ray Vaughan concert
on MTV.
Because for our younger listeners, back in the day, MTV used to actually play music.
Yes, for our younger listeners, MTV stands for music television. And
you
once
would never
upon a time, all it did was play videos and concerts.
That's right. It was glorious. It was a different time.
That was a much better MTV than now.
Were you an MTV kid? Did you watch MTV a lot?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, so did I. Headbangers Ball and I love, and MTV would just do these weird things. Like the first year they were on the air, they had Lemmy from Motorhead. And you know, a lot of people here in the States, unless you were a metal kid, you didn't know who Motorhead was. But
Right.
they get Lemmy from Motorhead, this weird looking guy with the warts and all, and they have him go Christmas caroling in the suburbs, and they send a film crew just along filming it. It's the most hilarious fucking thing you've ever seen.
That's hysterical. That's hysterical. I mean, all I remember is like coming home from school and just watching MTV.
Yep, same here.
You know?
Same here.
Anyway,
so yeah, all of a sudden they get an alert, and the security cameras show Hank and Iceman that, you know, something's happening to Chris. These tentacles are bursting out of his body, and you know, they sound the alarm. They head down there. You know, Bobby freezes Chris right away. Gargoyle shows up, and you know, Beast gives him orders, etc. And Iceman fears he knows what they're up against, and he reminds Hank that he was on his college speaking tour when they previously fought this foe, but he is terrified, and rightly so.
yeah, he is terrified. I also will point out that the block of ice he freezes Chris in, well, the transformed Chris into, is again reminiscent of John Carpenter's The Thing. This is not a criticism, by the way. One of my favorite movies of all time, huge influence on me. I also want to point out, Brian, since we're reading the floppy comics, that in this most horrific of Defenders issues, there is a one-page ad for subscriptions to Marvel's spin-off imprint, Star Comics, which was their kids' comics imprint at the time. And here are the titles that were available from Star Comics at the time: The Ewoks, Fraggle Rock, Heathcliff, Planet Terry, Wally the Wizard, Strawberry Shortcake, Muppet Babies, and Peter Porker were among the offerings of that time.
That's right. Now, of them all, who would have thought that Peter Porker would
be a movie star
into vogue once again? You know, my 11-year-old dungeon master, you know, Into the Spider-Verse, we've seen it like 7 times now. He loves it. He loves Miles Morales. You know, the way I loved Peter Parker when I was his age, but he was adamant that he wanted to read those issues of the Spectacular Spider-Ham. So I spent a small fortune finding them online.
Well, they're about to collect them all, and there's actually a new Peter Porker series on the way.
Yeah.
Anyway, and he would be a good Defender. In fact, Brian, I think you need to rewrite the Thor thing that you just wrote that included the elf with a gun and put Peter Porker in there.
I don't know the amount of aliens they've made me remove from that scene. The update on that, as far as the new draft goes this week, Elf with a Gun and Howard the Duck and Pip the Troll are still in there. And I have Rom the Space Knight's armor. I cannot, of course, use Rom because Marvel no longer has the license to him, but I can use his armor.
Okay.
But they put their foot down with the number of aliens I had included in the alien bar. So I had to use about half of what I'd originally included.
All right. Well, so I can't wait to hear / read that. So then we get into this really creepy scene. There's a farm, and a family is just sitting down to watch Dynasty, one of the big hit shows of that era. When they hear what sounds like a stampede from outside, they go out, and the father of this family of farmers picks up his binoculars, and what he's seeing, Brian, is so freaking cool for us horror people, but also really disturbing, particularly if you love animals.
That's right. It says each horse has a rider, like a green mockery of a man with tentacles instead of arms and legs, and they're stuck to the horses like ivy. I've never seen a face like that on a horse unless it was mad or dying.
Yep. Yeah. The riders, and there are a bunch of them. It's a whole stampede of horses here. They again look like something out of Swamp Thing. They are really horrifying to look at, sort of Jack of the Green style characters. But the fact of their tentacles that are their arms and legs look like they're attached to or even burrowed underneath the horse's skin. It's a really disturbing panel.
It really is. And Perlin's line work here, it's some of the he's a great artist, and I always think of his Defenders run. It's my favorite, second only to Sal Buscema's run on the book. But this is some of the most horrific stuff he's done since the Six-Fingered Hand. I mean, it's you think back to those renditions of Hell that he drew. This is equal to that,
Yeah. Well, so Bobby and Hank and Gargoyle are flying back up to the from the valley up to the Eyrie when giant let's just call them spore hands, giant hands and eyes and tentacles and mouths thrust out of the ground to try to capture them. It does, in fact, grab the vehicle that they're flying in, but Gargoyle manages to blast it free. And they get into the hangar in the Eyrie, which, thanks to Candy Southern, has been made impenetrable, at least for the moment.
Right. Meanwhile, the other Defenders are on their way back, from their everything that happened in the last issue, and they receive a distress call from the rest of their teammates, but then something jams the transmission. So Moondragon makes telepathic contact with the Beast, Iceman, and Gargoyle, and she tells them to hurry up. So they get back to the Eyrie, and they notice that there's a fog surrounding it, and we see that inside as well, as Iceman, Gargoyle, and Sassafras are staring out the window, and they're like, we can't see anything. There's fog. And then suddenly the fog clears, and there's something pressing against the glass.
And this is great. I have to ask Peter Gillis if it's a coincidence that my two favorite John Carpenter movies are merged into one in this issue, which is The Fog. But that will not explain what they see in the fog, which is a group of fanged, mist-born, red-eyed bunnies.
That's right. Night of the Lepus, Food of the Gods.
Again, I just watched Night of the Lepus or Lepus for the first time ever last week. And they're clawing at the glass. Now, this is sort of bulletproof tempered glass that they can't get in. But then they see, Brian, and you can see how much I love this, that the bunnies are sort of just like extensions, they're extrusions at the end of more of these tentacles. It's so freaking creepy. It's like, what's that fish? Is it the angler fish that I can't think of it? But
yes.
Anyway, it's creepy as hell, man.
It's very creepy. It's extremely creepy. Now, I have a question for you. Bottom left panel of that page. Iceman, he's worried because Sassafras is having none of these rabbits. She is ready to go out there and tear these rabbits apart. And what does it look? Bobby scolds her and says, "Bad dog." But what does it look to you like he's doing in that panel?
Well, it could be one of many things.
It looks to me like he's clubbing the dog with an ice stick.
It does look like he's clubbing the dog. He could also just be holding her back with an ice stick.
Okay.
I prefer to think that. But he is a man who spends 24 hours a day in his underpants.
This is true.
So there's no telling what Bobby's up to at any given time.
Well, then Isaac figures out that he can focus his soul blast beams through the glass without breaking it. And that temporarily takes care of the vampiric tentacled fog bunnies.
The vampiric tentacled fog. Yeah, because you're right. It's these evil demon bunnies who are like Ralphie Glick showing up at the window of Danny in Salem's Lot.
That's a great analogy.
Mixed with the fog, mixed with the thing, and they're an anglerfish. I'm not even making sense anymore. But I love, because I had completely forgotten that. When I turned the page, I was like, damn, that is disturbing. In any case.
we then get to what I think might actually be my favorite part of these two issues. This conversation between Iceman and Gargoyle, where Gillis finally seems to be looking back over his run and looking over DeMatteis's setup for these new defenders. And basically, we get Bobby, reminding Isaac that, he's scared. He's faced danger as a group, but, now they're here and the other defenders are hundreds of miles away, and Hank's down in the lab. And Isaac finishes for him. He says, and the only one you can rely on is an ugly little demon you don't even know. And Isaac admits, frankly, the two of them don't have anything in common except the defenders. And he's right. Bobby's this, what's he here? 18, 19, maybe. Yeah. And maybe, Isaac's a 90-year-old World War I veteran trapped in the body of a demon. They don't have anything in common.
Except the defenders.
But then Isaac says, you've had all that X-Men training. I've just had to pick this shit up as I went along with the defenders. And you see the two of them bonding. It's a really good moment.
Yeah, it is. It is a great moment. And I like Bobby's, coda on that scene where he says, it looks like it's a little late for us to put in for a transfer right now from this situation. So I guess we'll just have to win. Which is it's a great combo.
Right.
So basically then we cut to Hank and we see him, he's inside some kind of hazmat suit, and he's checking out the organism. It's a colony type organism, he tells us, with individual cells nearly as independent as protozoans. The large structure is imitative. So basically, again, like the Thing, it can look like anything, but it really is just billions of these tiny little cells all joined together, clinging together to create these larger manifestations. Beast wants to help Chris, who is still trapped in ice, but he's just trying to figure it out, and he doesn't understand why he can't see deeper until he realizes that there's some radiation present, that the radioactive material in each cell is the cause of this insistent mutation, making it hard for him to investigate further.
That's right.
And I believe, Brian, if we go back, isn't it gamma radiation that caused this?
Exactly. Ephraim was a prospector who was looking for gold on a gamma bomb test site. In fact, the gamma bomb test site that first gave birth to one of the founding members of the Defenders, the Hulk. This we've seen in Marvel continuity, gamma radiation affects different characters different ways. And I love this rendition,
Yeah. And I have to say that, again, coming to this next scene, I keep coming across these scenes in this issue thinking, this is something I would put in a book, or you would put in a book.
Oh, hell yes.
These are things like that. The reason I laugh is because I enjoy them so much. And they're like horrible things to do to your reading audience. But of course, as the audience, we would love it.
This upcoming scene reminded me of our mutual friend Tim Lebbon's novel, The Nature of Balance. I don't know if you ever read that one or not.
Did.
But as the Defenders fly up to their runway, they find that they can't land because it's covered with plant creatures, spore creatures, just sitting there waiting for them. And Moondragon says, it's huge. It has almost no mind, but it's evil and it seeks our lives. So Warren ends up having to take the plane to the town at the base of the mountain, Elijah. And you'll remember, of course, the sheriff there. He's been a supporting character in the book. He tells him, I'm glad you showed up. There's some weird shit going on.
Yeah. And what I love is he basically saying, hey, people are freaked out. And this here's Hulk country. These people are used to things getting wrecked, but nothing like this has ever happened before. So the Defenders, take off to head up to the Eyrie. But as Angel is flying, Moondragon sends him a mental message, essentially saying, do not go into that fog that you see, because if you do, you're fucked.
Right. One thing we should point out, as she did last issue, Moondragon twice Actually, more than twice. In the last issue, she used her powers on a lot of people's minds. She does the same thing here with the sheriff.
Oh, that's right.
She calms him down, and then she says, I know it was an intrusion into their minds, but in this case, I thought. And Valkyrie says, oh, don't apologize, Moondragon. You've given them a most valuable gift.
Right.
But has she really?
Yeah. Well, and she also says it's not just the sheriff. She's calmed down all the people in the valley who are afraid.
Right.
And all I can think is I watched day before yesterday. I watched this. Speaking of Tim Levin, this documentary called Free Solo.
Oh yes, great.
Yeah, it's great. But this guy is crazy. I mean, these people have death wish, and I love the fact that in the documentary he goes. For those of you who don't know, what I'm talking about. This guy, free soloing is when you climb a mountain with just your hands and feet. No ropes, right. No pythons, nothing special on your shoes. And he climbed El Capitan, the first person ever to do it without ropes or anything. It's like 3,200 feet or something like that. It's insane.
Right.
And there's a scene in the documentary where he goes to get an MRI because they're studying his brain, trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with him. And people like him, and they find that his amygdala does not fire. He does not have the same fear response that normal people have.
That's right.
And so this reminds me of that, weirdly, that Moondragon's basically shutting down the appropriate fear response.
Right.
These people should be afraid.
And they absolutely should, because as the sun rises on the valley, the defenders are on top of the mountain. And it says they greet the new day with horror. And I got to tell you, I agree. This half splash page might be the scariest thing Don Perlin has ever drawn.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, if you can think of, if you're a Lovecraft fan, the Crawling Chaos.
Yeah.
That's what he's drawn here. The entire valley is filled with this shifting, changing, thousand-eyed, thousand-mouthed, tentacled horror, amoeba-like horror.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you'll use this panel on YouTube.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And then even better, though, and again, that's fantastic. But again, another creepy thing, you turn the page, and this, for those who write comics, is the importance of the page turn. You have the Aerie wreathed in fog still, and then you cut inside to Isaac and Bobby, and all of a sudden, all that green shit has become 3 giant fists that are banging on the glass. And bam, bam, bam. It's creepy.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. Like I said, I remember enjoying this as a teenager, but going back, not only rereading as an adult, but as somebody who makes my living, writing horror. It's so well done here. My hat is off to Gillis.
Yeah. And then here's the pièce de résistance for the Moondragon's subplot going on here. Because the character who has trusted her the least, even up to this moment, is still Hank McCoy.
Yep.
And Hank has been researching, and he's so close to finding an answer that can save them all, but he's so exhausted that he's basically passing out. And Moondragon pops into his mind and says, Beast, I can wipe the weariness from your brain for a time with your permission. Now, she does ask permission here. She says, do I have it? And Beast says, please, yes. So all of a sudden, her redemption is apparently complete.
Right.
I say apparently.
Apparently. Meanwhile, in the valley, the giant amoeba thing gathers itself together into something like a giant slug and begins moving up the valley and onto the mansion.
I just want to say also the other thing that springs to mind in this is Hedorah the smog monster from Godzilla movies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Or a little bit of Biollante from Godzilla as well.
Oh, even more Biollante. You're right.
Yep. Basically, Moondragon points out this thing is like a slime mold. What it's trying to do is anchor itself and, send up a fruiting body so it can send spores out all over the world.
But this is the episode for recommendations for other things that people should try because they inspired or are inspired by this story. But whether knowingly or not, M.R. Carey's novel, The Girl with All the Gifts, if you haven't read it, also is reminiscent of this moment. If you've seen the film or read the novel, you'll know what I mean.
Right.
In any case, Moondragon decides that even though touching this stuff, she's already kept Angel from going into the fog because these spores will get inside him. Touching this stuff is essentially a death sentence. She decides, well, the only way to really do what I need to do here is to get inside it. So she jumps down into the valley and starts walking into it.
Right.
Which is pretty gross.
It's disgusting. But when she gets inside it, she realizes she doesn't have the power to smash it, to disrupt the cellular pattern. Only one defender does. Isaac Christians, a.k.a. the Gargoyle. And so she asks him to open the window and walk inside of the creature as well.
And Isaac does it. He trusts her.
Yeah. Yep.
He says there's no other way. And Iceman's like running out of the room with sassafras and ices up the doorway he came through. Now, in order for this to happen, Brian, in order for Moondragon and Gargoyle to really work together, Moondragon realizes that they've got to literally merge their psyches together.
That's right.
And we've seen this conceit in a lot of other places, but in this case, it actually functions in a very interesting way because previously, when Gargoyle had been taken over by that wizard and made into a monster, evil, he was able to see inside her psyche and he saw darkness there. He saw evil to be afraid of. But here, Moondragon kisses him. They merge psyches completely. And in that moment, he sees nothing but pure light inside her.
Yep.
Which is very interesting. Different twist.
It is. So yeah, they're one, and then they lash out as one. And in one panel, they defeat the creature.
Yeah, it says, a shudder goes through the creature. It rears for a moment into the sky, thrashes, and begins to dissolve. And then there's just goop everywhere.
Yep. And when the goop disappears, Hank and Bobby rush in and see Moondragon and Gargoyle still locked in an embrace, still French kissing.
I don't know if they're French kissing. I think that's Brian's fantasy right there, but I'm not sure which side. It's Moondragon's the bald one, so
you know me, I'm down for anything. So.
Hey, I get it. So basically, they come in and they are kissing, and Beast apologizes for interrupting, but Moondragon says no apologies are necessary, except that she owes Isaac an apology for thrusting this intimacy upon him. And Isaac says, no apology is necessary, Moondragon, for I've touched beauty, and my heart is very full today. There are a lot of ways you could read that response, Brian. That's
right. I read it. I find Isaac's expression very intriguing.
Yeah,
he looks.
Go ahead.
I mean, he looks like the cat that ate the canary. But there's also a sort of sinister bent to it, with the inking and the coloring, and you have to wonder just what is going on here with Moondragon still.
Yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting, but we will see. You may be reading into that because you know what's coming.
Maybe.
But we will discover what is coming in our very next episode. But Brian, before we do that, while we were recording this episode of Defenders Dialogue, we received from Armand Rosamilia, the captain of Project Entertainment Network, an ad for this very episode, which I will now read to you.
Okay.
Weird fiction collides with Gnostic tradition in The Lord of Always by David Bryan, a novel of supernatural mystery and cosmic terror. For Frank and Roz Tanner, Booking a honeymoon at Penhale House set amid beautiful Cornish landscapes should have been the perfect getaway, but the house sits on a nexus point, a gateway to other realms. Amid a turbulence of twisting realities and facing legions of fallen angels and nightmarish servitors, Frank and Roz become separated. Frank turns to a local pensioner for assistance, but the enigmatic George Smoke is a man who offers more questions than answers. Confronted by dark gods and cosmic abominations, Frank learns of the great deceit being played on humankind, and as he faces a battle for his wife's soul, he knows he must succeed because saving Roz will be the key to everything. I return my gaze to the fragmented monster resting in my palm. Can this really be the remains of an angel? And if it is, shouldn't we all tremble in anticipation of what awaits at our end? The paperback is available from various outlets. The ebook is exclusive on Amazon Kindle and can currently be read for free if you have a Kindle Unlimited subscription. That is The Lord Always by David Bryan.
Well, I am looking forward to that. I read his previous novel, which, if you're a fan of William Hope Hodgson particularly, it's a really great tribute to him. So I will be looking for this and thank him for sponsoring this week's show, even though we only found out about it here at the end of recording.
There you go. Well, it was perfect timing from my perspective.
It was. All right. Well, next episode, I should say. At that time in Marvel history, there was something going on impacting all of the mutants in the Marvel universe. It began in the Dazzler graphic novel that came out at that time, and it picks up. It continues in Defenders. So we'll find out about that next issue. Yeah. Or next episode, I should say.
You keep saying that. You can say next issue. It's fine.
Well, it's because I'm back to reading floppies now. So it's got me thrown off here. All right. In the meantime, folks, if you enjoyed this episode of Defenders Dialogue, you can find them all. They're archived on iTunes and Spotify, and I've got them up on the Brian Keene page on YouTube. You might also enjoy two other podcasts. First of all, there's The Horror Show with Brian Keene. As you may have guessed from the title, that's a show I host every week where we interview the biggest names in horror fiction and also report on news from the genre. You might also enjoy Three Guys with Beards. That's a show that Chris hosts every week, along with best-selling novelist Jonathan Mayberry, James A. Moore. All three of these shows are made possible by the Project Entertainment Network. If you enjoy Defenders Dialogue, you can get all kinds of sweet swag. You can get coffee mugs, pillows, T-shirts, bumper stickers, etc. Go to projectentertainmentnetwork.com and take a look, see what they have.
Sounds good. Folks, we will see you next week on Defenders Dialogue. And until then, Brian, we say, Excelsior, true believers.
See you next week,
You're listening
folks.
to American Top 40. More tragedy in the news today. Kim Kardashian has a new baby. What the hell? There's nothing good to listen to. Hey, wait, what's this?
You gotta roll that out.
See, it makes me do weird things. I don't like it.
God damn it.
I'd
be going down on myself?
Shit. Hey guys, it's Bill,
Mick,
Maya,
and Junior
from the Unsupervised Podcast.
check us out every Thursday on the Project Entertainment Network.
Take a break from the stress of the world and come have a laugh with or at us.
Bill.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology featuring short fiction from the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network shows Three Guys with Beards, Jim Moore, Jonathan Mayberry, and Chris Golden,
Tom Clark from Necrocast, On,
Brian Keene of The Horror Show, Chuck Buda, and Armand Rosamilia of The Mando Method,
Mary San Giovanni of Cosmic Shenanigans,
Jay Wilburn from Matters of Faith,
John Urbansick of Ink Stains,
Biz Zung's Mr. Frank.
Available on Kindle and in paperback and through the Project Entertainment Network store.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.